Have you ever opened up a spreadsheet, looked at all that raw data, and just felt completely lost? Yeah, you're not alone. It can look like a total mess. But what if I told you there's a way to turn all that chaos into clarity? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to do, using a really simple but powerful tool that helps you find the story hidden in all that noise.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll cover what a frequency table even is. Then we'll get into its key parts, and after that, we're going to build one from scratch. We'll even learn how to deal with tricky missing data, and finally, we'll turn our table into a super clear visual chart. Ready? Let's get started. Okay, let's dive right in. I want to start with a really basic question. When you're just staring at a wall of raw data, where do you even begin to make sense of it all? Right, so picture this. You just ran a survey and now you have this long list of answers. How in the world do you find the patterns hiding in there? I mean, trying to spot the most common responses by just counting them all by hand? That sounds awful. There's got to be a better way. And of course there is. It's the frequency table. The best way to think of it is as a data organizer. It takes that jumbled up mess and neatly summarizes everything, showing you exactly how frequently, how often each specific answer shows up. And just like that, the confusion starts to disappear. Now, to build one of these tables, you really only need to get your head around two key concepts. They're basically the building blocks that give the whole thing its power. And these two ideas? They are deceptively simple. On the one hand, you have absolute frequency. That's just a straightforward count. 6 people said female, the absolute frequency is 6. Easy. But relative frequency, that's where the real magic happens. It gives you context. It asks, okay, 6 out of how many? Turning that into a percentage, like 60%, suddenly makes it way more meaningful and easy to compare. All right, that's enough theory. You know, the best way to really understand this stuff is to just do it. So let's build one together, step by step. So here's our raw data. We asked 10 people for their gender. Right now, it's just a list. You can't really tell at a glance which category is the most common. This is that data chaos we were talking about. This is our starting point. Bringing some order to this mess is actually a really simple 3-step process. First, we're just going to list out all the unique categories we see: male, female, and diverse. Step 2, we do a quick tally for each one. That's our absolute frequency. And finally, step 3, we turn those counts into percentages. That gives us the relative share. Let's see what that looks like. And voila, here it is, our finished table. The power of this is just immediate. You can see instantly that female was the most common response, at 50%, followed by male at 40%. The pattern that was totally hidden in that messy list before, now it's perfectly clear. But, you know, the real world is almost never that neat and tidy. What happens when people just don't answer a question? This is a super common problem, and if we don't handle it the right way, it can seriously mislead us. The source material we're looking at makes a really critical point here. It says we have to avoid distorting our statistics. See, when someone skips a question, that missing data can totally throw off our percentages. The solution? We need to add another column to our table to account for it. And that solution is called the valid percent. It's actually a pretty clever tweak. Instead of basing our percentage on the total number of surveys we collected, we base it only on the number of people who actually gave us an answer. So for this one calculation, we just pretend the blank responses don't exist. Let's see this in action. Okay, in this example, one person didn't respond. See that percentage column? It's based on all 10 surveys. It says that 50% of respondents were female. But is that really true? Not quite. It's 50% of the total surveys, including the one that was left blank. It's just a little bit misleading. Now look at the solution. By adding that valid percentage column, we're recalculating based only on the 9 people who actually answered, and all of a sudden, the number for female jumps up to over 55%. This right here is the key takeaway. It gives us a much more accurate picture of what the people who actually participated had to say. Okay, so we've organized our data, we've handled the missing values. Now it's time for the final and, honestly, the most satisfying step, making our findings totally impossible to ignore by turning them into a visual. Let's use a new example from our source material. Some students were asked what brand of car they drive. The frequency table here does its job pretty well. We can see there's a tie between VW and Ford, but our brains still have to do a little work to compare all those numbers. We can make this even easier. And this is what happens when we visualize it. A simple bar chart. Instantly, your eyes just go to the tallest bars. You don't need to read a single number to know that VW and Ford are the most popular. And that is the ultimate goal, communicating the story in your data with immediate visual impact. So we went from a messy list to a clean table, and then to a crystal clear chart. We've totally unlocked the pattern that was hidden in those numbers. And that really just leaves us with one final thought. What stories are waiting to be discovered in your own data? Because now you have the tool to find out.